So welcome everybody to Ready to Amplify, the interview series to discuss behind the scenes with women entrepreneurs who are amplifying and taking steps to get more visibility, engagement, build their community, make a bigger impact at the end of the day. And I'm here with Amanda Cupido.
Close. Cupido.
Thank you, Amanda. And Amanda just recently released her book. It is called Let's Talk Podcasting, the essential guide to doing it right. And it has been a journey to getting there. We're going to talk about what it took for her to actually write the book. We have this statistic that always stands out in my mind about of all the people that want to write a book, only 3% actually do. And then 1% of that 3% publish, print, and promote it. And it's a lot, right? And when you're launching something, there's a lot of energy and mindset and all that other stuff besides just the basic logistics, right?
Yeah.
So welcome. So we're going to get started with this interview. Just really wanted to introduce everyone to you as the author, but also you run your own consulting agency, helping thought leaders and organizations with storytelling platforms and really getting their brand story out there. Would you say that's a good synopsis of what you do on the consulting side?
Yes, definitely. And there's a lot of people who want to get into the world of podcasting, and I find that there's two extremes. There's some people who want to do it, but they're completely intimidated. They have no idea where to start. This is people and brands alike. And so I'm happy to come in and just kind of help to just show how accessible the medium really is. But at the same time, you also have a lot of people who want to start one and they think it's just so easy. All they have to do is hit record and then it's up there, and they don't maybe put enough thought into a strategy behind it. And just like any good content, a strategy is really needed. And so I'm going to try to bridge the gap between the two extremes, help people be thoughtful about launching podcasts, strategic, and then executing it start to finish, but also helping them along the way to make sure that they know just that it is a platform that anyone could take advantage of.
I love that. And Amanda, you're an award-winning podcasting producer. You also teach and support the team over at Seneca College on the podcasting, some of the podcasting courses there, as well as we're working with the students. And so this is something you live and breathe in your day-to-day. And I think also, like many of the viewers today, working behind the scenes is kind of what we do as service-based entrepreneurs, right? And so when you do amplify, often that means, we are stepping outside and into a bigger spotlight and making a bigger impact by getting seen, being heard. And we're going to share with people, because you've been on TV recently. You have an upcoming event on December 4th at The Social, which is our Canadian CTV talk show, a morning talk show. And so it's morning talk show, right? It's morning.
It actually airs at 1:00, but yeah, it's date.
If you're on the West Coast, it's the morning show.
There you go.
Let's say. So let's look at the decision you made to write the book. So did it always start as a podcasting book, or was it something else in the beginning?
Yeah, so it was actually quite the journey. I've always wanted to write the book. I was probably going to be one of those stats that I said I really wanted to write a book, and I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted it to be about. And I defaulted to wanting to write about actually relationships and dating stories, because it was what I ended up finding myself talking about with friends. And I had some funny anecdotes in my back pocket. It never even occurred to me to write something that was with my career, which I have been working so hard towards building. Yet the idea of positioning myself as a thought leader wasn't instinctual to me, which is, I can't really explain it. I don't know why, but that was just where my instincts fell. Luckily, I met my publisher, Doris Chung, who runs PBS Publishing. And when we were talking about my book and a series of short stories is what I was looking at, she asked me about podcasting and saw my face light up, and it was a no-brainer. She's like, "Why aren't you writing about this? This is clearly what you're passionate about." I'm like, "You're right. Let's do it." And so the rest was history.
That's fantastic. And so Doris brought you under an umbrella with her publishing company. Is it Publisher PS? And then is sort of the printing side, and then Publish Her is the new, is that how she, amazing.
She's focusing on thought leadership, specifically with women, just because that they're typically underrepresented. they're typically going through same sort of things that, I went through, where I'm looking to maybe write something. I knew I wanted to write something that was nonfiction, but a lot of, women tending to write fiction books, but really wanting to change the scene, change some of the stats and how many women authors are writing nonfiction stories. And so stories, they're actually, it's their real life, right? Or expertise, really trying to leverage that, leverage women authors as a whole, which is awesome.
Awesome. I love that. And I think you hit on a good point, is that a lot of us have this idea or this wish or dream to write a book, and then it just doesn't get to the top of the priority list. And so how did the process come together? Like, did it take several months, or once you decided, did it just kind of like flow, or how?
Yeah, it was, ups and downs for sure. I mean, once I decided, I still wasn't sure if it was actually going to happen. I was hesitant for a bit in the beginning. To write the book as a whole, it took me about 2 years, which is, and then it was on and off, right? There was months where I just didn't even look at it. I was focusing on actually producing podcasts, building client base. But then there were days I ended up doing my workflow. I know everyone works differently. I found that I needed like full weekend set aside where I did a deep delve into writing. I couldn't just do these half an hour bits and pieces, because and with anything that's, nonfiction, that has to go through a lot of research, and you want to be really intentional with how you're writing, and it's not just a story that you're flowing out of you, and it's not just creative juices. There's a little bit more to it. Yeah. And so I really decided I would chunk out weekends and just either be in a location where I was somewhat hidden, like there was no surprise visitors. I was tucked away in a corner, and I just put my head down and wrote. And so that was really helpful for me. So I went through blitz of getting a lot done and having it pause for a bit, getting feedback, and then another moment to go blitz. And so I also found that not writing it in order was really beneficial, a tactic for me. Yeah, because I think you get bogged down with how much am I putting in the introduction or the foundational piece of the book? Did I cover everything I needed? And that might be trickier for you to get started. So what I did was I had separate parts to my book. My book has 5 different parts to it. And so I kind of had those separated, and I sat down to write. Sometimes I felt really inclined to write a very specific part, or I was feeling inspired in a very, very specific topic. And so I just went to that part of the book and wrote there, just like really taking yourself as the lead and not forcing yourself to, do something because you think you should, or this is the process on how to do it. I really gave myself flexibility in that. And which, you then have to be mindful of that later, where you have things kind of all over the place. But it definitely worked out, and I found it helped with my writing process as a whole.
I love it. And so we were talking earlier before we went live about the process of launching something and then the crash after the launch. And so it takes a lot of energy. Like, how did you feel like once you released it, like that launch day? And I think the day after, you were on one of our local TV stations. And how did you prepare? How did you feel? What was that like for those that are watching that want to think about writing their own book?
Yeah, I think it was great. I think you can never be as prepared as you want to be. I think there was myself and my publisher could have used some more time, but I think that's the nature of the business, right? Things happen, you got to hit go. And so it really comes down to prioritizing, making sure that, you don't get bogged down by some of the little details. I was so excited for the launch. It almost didn't feel real to me. We had 2 launch parties, which also kind of dragged up the launch, which was great though. And thanks to everyone who came out. It was really wonderful. But it gave me a real chance to start speaking about the book and really realizing that this is out there now. And it was something I still feel like odd to say that I'm an author. It's my first book, and I always wanted this, but it's crazy that it's already here. I think the media piece is a whole separate piece, and that still, as you mentioned, is ongoing and unraveling for me. I still have some interviews coming up, and I still have some pitches I need to follow up on. Yeah. And so that whole piece also is just an entire world of its own. And again, you can, and I come from a media background. I'm a former journalist, and so I think in my head, I could just do that forever, right? I could be pitching and repitching and repurposing it, and so you have to set priorities and make goals and try to be strategic about it.
Well, it's so funny too, because I think that it takes a village, like you said, like, it's about reaching out and getting seen, booking those events. Did you plan the launch party or did someone else?
Yeah, it was me pretty much. My publisher supported. I
Awesome.
also am doing a residency at the Toronto Public Library where I'm their innovator in residence and I'm helping make podcasting more accessible to the community, which is great. And they also help. So one of the launches was hosted at the Toronto Public Library, so they helped the logistics on that front. Yeah, and
Fantastic.
the other one was a media launch party that we did. So
I
it was
love
nice.
it.
Also, that was even a really big discussion. A thing that people don't realize when launching a book is who's coming to your launch. What's the strategy behind the launch? You can't throw a launch up and hope for the best, right? We really, again, as you can probably tell, I'm a really strict. I really champion having a good strategy and knowing why we're doing what we're doing. And
Yeah.
so that's why we really have to be intentional with, okay, if we're going to do a launch, who's it for? Are we covering all our audiences? This is why we ended up doing two.
I love it. I love it. And I see we have several viewers online. And if you're watching now, are you thinking about writing a book? Have you written a book? What's your thing? What will you be doing in 2019 to amplify, to share your stories with us as you're watching? Because I love hearing. I always get inspired by these interviews. And Amanda, everything you're saying, I mean, it's very inspiring. I always lead with strategy. I always say, like, content that converts is not an accident. It's a strategy. And, so I think the book itself, and, you mentioned a good point for those that might be watching on the replay or coming in a little later, is just that you can't just launch a podcast. Like, there has to be some strategy behind it. And I'm just going to check the screen too, just to make sure we haven't frozen, or if that's just mine. I always like to do a little check halfway through to keep things going. And yeah, so let me just double check. I'm going to reach out and click a few buttons, make sure we're still going. It could just be that I have multiple browsers on, and take a little peek here to see if there's any questions for everybody. Let's see here. We're just going to reload that, and I can see us talking. Yep, so we're good. We're good. This is excellent. Okay, so yeah, so Amanda, hold on one second. So Amanda, what was that like for you to kind of come from behind the scenes and then emerge into the spotlight in the last month or so, and doing these interviews? How are you preparing mentally for that? Or do you have, like, do you meditate? I mean, what is it? What's the secret?
I think it's going to be different for everyone. There's no one magic secret. I'm lucky that my background is in journalism and I used to be on the radio. And so doing media is actually a comfort spot for me, although I am used to being on the other side and controlling the interview and asking the questions. So it is quite the experience to be on the flip side of it. But what I did is actually what I recommend my clients to do before they speak to media or publicly as a whole, is just coming up with some key messages so that you're not trying to memorize stats and long paragraphs. You're just trying to memorize, or not memorize, but really feel comfortable with 3 or 4 topics or key pointers that you can default to. That's really going to sum up what you're doing and in the essence of it all, right? And so I just took some time in the midst of it all, which it was overwhelming, right? Yeah, I'm getting tons of email requests and events that I have to attend and work that I actually need to do and review and write myself and whatnot. But amidst all the busyness and trying to take a moment to actually just take some time for yourself in your own time. And I do yoga once a week for sure. Yoga won't give you your key messages either. So you need to just make sure you have the time to really be strategic with what you want to say and feeling comfortable with that. And so once I determined that, the rest was easy.
I love that, and that's so valuable. I think just being proactive about what you want to get across, what your intention is, and then, yeah, that falls right into place. So you have some go-tos, especially when all those lights are shining and, it's like, you got to turn it on. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So one of the things that I've found is that people are always overcoming their fears when they are stepping into bigger spotlight. And did you have any coming into this? Like, did you, some of the common ones, even for me, I've been 20 years in the marketing and publishing world industry, and I sometimes experience that imposter syndrome, or like, oh, like, will people trust me, or, like that kind of thing. And how are you overcoming any fears? Have you experienced that in the launch itself?
I think I've experienced this through, everyone experiences in some sort of capacity in their life, I think. I experienced it the most probably when I was a journalist and I was going to report on things that maybe I didn't feel the most knowledgeable about, yet I'm the reporter who has to deliver a message to a large audience. And so I felt there was a real practice there with, trying to set aside what am I thinking and doing, what do I need to do to get this job done? And not being afraid to look silly or ask a dumb question in order for me to be able to execute, right? So I think that was a great practice for me in early stages of my career in audio, obviously in a different capacity. But, when I'm interviewing large politicians, sports, major athletes, Toronto athletes, and I'm, stepping into a scene that I'm not typically in, that really prepared me for what was to come. I think then moving forward in the podcasting space with me specifically, one of the big, as I call TSN turning points, I do like sports, and it's just one of those moments that really just changes everything. It changes the game. It might be something really small. And for me, I can really think back to 1 year ago this time, I was attending a podcasting conference called Work It. It was held in LA, but it's hosted by WNYC, and it's a podcasting conference for women. It's amazing. And I received a scholarship to attend, which I was really honored and flattered. But also with that, I knew I was going to be in rooms with like the best of the biz and a lot of people who were going to have their own podcasts, which I didn't. And I was producing, but I just didn't know how I would stack up comparatively to all these amazing women. And so I was a bit intimidated going into that. And I obviously knew I could be there. I got a scholarship to be there, but it still didn't give me the full, I still wasn't resting easy about stepping into those rooms and having some of those big conversations with some of the big players in the US market. Again, also this is the nature of the landscape now. Canada is a little bit further behind in our podcasting scene. And so just even me saying I'm a Canadian, I felt like I was immediately at a bit of a disadvantage maybe, or I would be judged, or that people would look down upon me. So, which is silly, right? It's all silly, but you build these narratives in your brain. But by the end of that conference, I felt so empowered. The women were amazing. I don't know if you've ever attended a conference that was all women, but I highly recommend it. The energy is different. It was fantastic, especially in an industry that's tech-based and typically, seeing a lot of men in the space. I felt it was really empowering to have all these women talking so highly about and talking so, just they were all feeling empowered, right? Everyone was buzzing and feeding off each other. And I think that was really that changed the course of me in podcasting. I came back feeling ready to go. I knew I had the chops to do it. I was in those conversations and keeping up and pushing the conversations forward with some of, again, the best of the biz. So I felt it really gave me the confidence to take this book and run with it and launch it and feel confident about it.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that. And I think that we surprise ourselves sometimes, right? We have this negative talk in our head that it's a constant, from the interviews I've done so far with the women in the series, that, it's an ongoing thing. Like, it's not just like you wake up and you're confident, or, it's an art form almost, like, of like, just constantly like nurturing that part of you, right? And that voice and reversing that voice, of course, as well, which is crazy. When you think about it, right? Because, common sense, mindset, it's just, yeah. But so tell us, I couldn't leave our viewers without sharing a few podcasting tips, maybe from the book, or tell us if you could share with us those that are maybe already podcasting or want to tighten it up, or that might be a good place to start. And maybe even those, I think a lot of people are thinking about podcasting. So are there any thinking about podcasting tips you can share with us today?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll start with one that's actually relevant for both if you have a podcast and if you're starting one, and it really does go back to strategy. I think a lot of the people that I'm sitting down with and a lot of the companies I'm consulting with, a lot of people don't realize how much flexibility there is with podcasting. The base of my questions that I'm getting are like, how long should a podcast be? Exactly what kind of mic do I need? But I think people get caught up in these details and they need to just take a step back, starting off, or even if you're already doing it, take a moment to step back and think about the bigger picture and do some listening. This is what I always say is step one is listen to other podcasts.
Yes.
And I think people find one that they like and then they listen to it over and over and over again, but branch out. Listen to something that just has a cool thumbnail. Pick a topic randomly, type it into iTunes or wherever you get your podcast, and just take a listen. So you might be surprised at what kind of production is happening and the flexibility around production. And so the big, a whole chunk of my book is dedicated to finding the right format for what you're trying to do. And I think a lot of people instinctually think, I got to do a chat cast. A chat cast being two people, maybe a round table of people sitting down and talking about something.
Yeah.
And that does work, but it doesn't work. It's not the best format for every single type of information that wants to be shared, for every single business, for every single person. Maybe you're not even a great interviewer, but you feel sucked into doing this style of podcast. Don't force yourself to do it. Do something that makes sense. So you might even be knee deep in a podcast that you've picked your format and you think you need to stick with it. No. Major podcasts change their formats halfway through a season all the time or tweak it along the way. So really looking at what else is out there. There are vignettes. People are just doing 2-minute little clips that they're releasing really quickly. You can release them once a week, sure, on a regular basis, but you can also release them all at once and have like a mini series go out. So you're not committing, people get intimidated. How often do I have to publish, right? How long do I have to publish for? If that's giving you nerves and not feeding you right now, set that aside and do something that works for you. 6 episodes, that's it, that's season 1. And then maybe you release that quarterly or biannually or whatever works for you. So just taking that flex that the podcasting world offers, the length of time, don't stretch it to hit a specific time that you think is the right time. Give your content what it deserves. And if it's only 10 minutes, make it 10 minutes. And if your next episode needs to be a half an hour, make the next one a half an hour, right? So just allowing yourself that flexibility and really thinking, taking that step back and thinking big picture of what's the best way of sharing this information, and how, and then trying to get inspiration from others to hopefully dictate and give you ideas of how you can go about that.
I love that. And what I hear too is alignment, right? Like it has to feel good. It has to be, that's something I talk a lot about in my book as well, is that it can't, we're taught so much about what we have to do, what we should be doing. But I think that the thing is, you got to tweak and test and figure out what feels good for you, right? And have that alignment. So that's very exciting.
Coming in, actually, I'll just answer it. Teresa's asking, should you podcast more than once a week? Again, there's no right or wrong. If you can podcast more than once a week, go for it. Great. That's awesome. I think there's always a need for more content. So I'll never say that that's too much, but you have to make sure that content is good and worthy of going out twice a week, right? If you're just repeating yourself so they can hit your mark of doing 2 podcasts a week, then don't do it.
Oh, I love that answer. That's key. Thank you, Teresa, for asking that. That's awesome that that's showing up too. Are you seeing that on the Be Live dashboard too? Are you able to access? Oh, cool. Okay, cool. That's awesome. No, that's great.
I'm taking over. This is me. My journalists help me.
I love it. I know this is this is the world we live in, and it's only going to get faster, and technology is what we're surrounded by, right? So I remember going to the social media marketing world. It's a conference that they have every year by Social Media Examiner, and 2014. And they had interviewed, I think it was at that time, about 2,500 marketers, and podcasting, out of all the choices that people were choosing to invest in and expand in, it was around number 11. So it was just about to break top 10. And that was 2014. So that was 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And so this year, I think it came out as in the top 5 for sure. And I loved how Michael Stelzner, he's the CEO, founder of Social Media Examiner, but he said, what other platform do you get to be in people's ears for 30 minutes or an hour, while they're driving? It's so powerful and so engaging. And it's just a wonderful medium we have to explore, right? With the different platforms. And, and you mentioned earlier, in your consulting agency, that you help people on storytelling platforms. So what is a storytelling platform? Is that social media? Is that, what is that?
Yeah, it evolves. It's going to evolve. And I think part of my, business is also making sure that I'm keeping up with that and adjusting and helping people take advantage of the latest and greatest stuff that's coming out. We know that earlier this year, Facebook was actually doing some beta tests with micro podcasting as it was deemed. I don't know if Facebook coined it that, but in India, a lot of accounts got the ability to, instead of write a status, literally just hit a mic button and record a little snippet. Yeah. So that is going to eventually change the type of platforms that people are able to do this type of storytelling on. I also think right now it's the wild, wild west of audio. There are a lot of platforms out there that are trying to accommodate and facilitate this type of content that's being created and shared. But we haven't really hit our sweet spot yet. There's not, and Apple's holding a lot of things really close to their chest. It's Google is experimenting. It's just it really is. I'm gonna wait to see where the dust settles. Right now, where does it look like it's happening? There's a lot of people who are uploading to platforms like SoundCloud. There are people who are paying for hosting sites like on Simplecast or Lipson. But all of these are just details. And again, if these words are sounding intimidating to anyone who's listening, don't feel like you can't start podcasting if you don't understand that part of it. That's fine. And that's going to probably change in a year too, right? So I think it's just right now when I'm telling stories, I'm doing it for a variety of different platforms. Sometimes it is just someone's personal SoundCloud account, and I'm helping thought leaders publish some thoughtful audio on there. Sometimes it's businesses who are actually trying to create their own network of audio stories, and they're going to build a page and have it hosted elsewhere, but that's not the priority. They're going to be focusing it on their own branded website and be hosting and trying to make their website go-to spot for really great audio stories. So there are lots of different avenues.
Awesome. And I'm getting a little echo, but that just went away. Perfect. No, that's great. And I think that, it's so fun. Like it's kind of like you say, the wild, wild west, but it's fun, like to experiment and explore. And I think that we all learn differently. Some of us listen better. Some of us watch better. I know images are translated 40 times faster than text, so I think it's okay to take content and repurpose it as well, right? So that you're hitting touch points and hitting more people. So what's next for you after the launch? You have the social. So tell me a bit more about the social. I mean, I think a lot of the viewers here, when I started thinking about media for my launch, again, I'm always behind the scenes. I'm like, I have ideas and pitches, but what are you guys talking about? And what are you most excited about that interview coming up?
Yeah, I think it's great because it'll be my first nationwide interview, which is awesome. And I just really am excited to speak to all Canadians about it because my book really does incorporate a Canadian angle to podcasting, which I did not find any other books out there that really touched upon that, which I think is important. So when we're looking at podcasting, is understanding the landscape that you are stepping into and the context around it and how it's set to evolve. And so I think a big buzz topic that will be touched upon and that typically gets touched upon in my interviews is the future of podcasting. Like, where do I see it evolving? And so I typically tend to say these 3 points, which I'll share with you. And it's the fact that there's probably going to be a lot more interactive events. So not only conferences, but live shows and maybe immersive events where people are going to be walking in spaces and audio is going to be played or through your set, and it's actually going to be, incorporated into some more vivid forms of entertainment, so to say, which I'm excited for. I'm already seeing kind of little sparks of it coming out and experimental pieces. Second is branded podcasts, which I just personally, I am seeing, and I am the amount, of people that I'm speaking to and clients that are coming to me, it's incredible, and it's only been increasing. So I predict that's going to continue to increase. We're going to see a lot of companies putting out some really strong content and really value the art of audio storytelling and setting aside budgets in their marketing strategies to use this as a form of content marketing. The numbers that are coming back, Midroll does some great research of podcast marketing and return on investment and audience and like brand recognition from audiences. And it's just like the numbers are unheard of. They're so high, which is why marketers are actually looking to pay top dollar for ads and why brands might want to increase putting marketing dollars towards this sort of thing. And it's unprompted brand recall is what is just, it's unprecedented numbers.
Wow.
Yeah, which is great. And the final piece is I think there's going to be a lot more podcasts for kids.
Oh,
Yeah, and I think we have a couple. I mean, again, there's only a couple emerging, but we're really seeing that. And instinctually, you're thinking, well, kids love iPads. They're swiping. They want, but you know what? When an audio story is done right, it just like for an adult, it is so captivating. And so we have a couple of them merged on the scene. NPR has one called Brains On. It's really well done and it's so creative and magical. And even just listening to it as an adult, I can just appreciate the production value that goes into it. I know that NPR is going to be investing a lot of more of their budget into creating podcasts for children and families, and CBC in Canada as well has put that as part of their mandate moving forward. So just a good, cool thing to keep an eye out for.
I love that. And I think that's going to excite a lot of our listeners too, because I think that if they haven't already, they may shift a bit more into the audio space, which I love. And we're going to just share here. I want to share a link to your book before we let everyone get on with their day. I always like to keep things just under half an hour. And it was just such a pleasure to meet with you today, Amanda. And I'm excited for you. I think that, people watching on replay, if you hashtag replay in the comments, then maybe Amanda can loop back. And I'd love for you. There was the conference you mentioned earlier. If you can pop that in the comments later for people to check out, that would be incredible. And I just, for everyone watching this month too, and Amanda, this whole process of being ready to amplify. I think you said it earlier too, there could always be more that you can do, right? And you never technically feel ready. And that's the norm, I think. And, part of this interview series is about also me coming out of my spotlight and sharing my new book, The Ready to Amplify, which I want people to step into a bigger spotlight and to shine a little bit brighter and make a bigger impact. But I want them to have that alignment, to be inspired. And so all the women, including yourself, that I'm interviewing, I just feel have inspired me, will inspire the millions in the future. And so it's all kind of part of a whole up-leveling for me and the community around me, that I want to inspire those to find their voice and step into that bigger spotlight. And I've included also a lot of tools at leightfowler.com/book, which I think is just something, there's over $500 worth of training programs and things that if you buy the book, send me the receipt. We're going to do that promo as well. Make sure you don't miss Amanda on the social, December 4th. So set your PVRs. I think that's what they're called now. I barely watch TV anymore. I think I'm all about Netflix. Right? But I can't wait, and just wishing you continued success. Thanks for joining us today and sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, over and out. Hang on with me for a second, Amanda, and we'll talk to you guys later.